Alex, I'm delighted today to be joined in the downtown den by the Conservative candidate for the Greater Manchester Mayor role, Laura Evans. Laura, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm enjoying it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I suppose the first question to ask is, big job, Greater Manchester mayoral role. I know at the moment that you've your own business. So what's the attraction of the Greater Manchester mayor role for you? What the sort of things that has attracted you to applying for such a difficult, challenging position?
Well, I've been in Trafford as a councillor for many years, obviously. So when I first came into it, just so we know where we stand, I was 2011. I came on a policy that I thought was wrong. I wasn't a politician, a mum, interferer, local activist for sort of, parks and stuff like that, but never did politics particularly, but always knew where I stood in politics. And then I got offered this, this thing happened about schools, and I decided I was going to get involved and support this issue that bothered me greatly. And before I knew it, then as time went on, I was delivering leaflets. And if you've never ever joined a political party, whichever one you have, I can assure you, the first thing they do is drop off a bag of leaflets at your door and give you 250 doors to deliver to at least. And so that started, and then about into that for about a year or two before somebody said you could be a paper candidate for a seat that was unlikely to be won. And so I didn't understand why that would be the case. And so from there in 2011, I did win the seat in Trafford, and then I became an executive member in Trafford, and then I won the seat 4 years later with a lot more votes. And then I, by then, become an executive member in Trafford. I'd seen change. I delivered change. I could understand what you could do. Trafford, whether we like it or not, or whether other people agree, is a big linchpin in Greater Manchester. Mm-hmm. It's a massive, and I did things there that made a huge difference. So we backed the Lancashire Cricket Club and ended up getting the Ashes there because the hotel got built. I bought the Manchester Marathon. I reinvigorated our libraries. So then when this opportunity came, it would make great sense to say, I've worked there, seen it, understand it, and I've sat within the combined authority. So it wasn't such a great difference to take that on.
And when you've looked at the different responsibilities, the powers that the Greater Manchester Mayor has, where are the areas that you would particularly like to bring your influence? What are the sort of policy objectives that you'd be setting yourself?
So I'm particularly keen on small business. Everybody will tell you that. I've this is something like home to me because I set up business clubs, the Trafford Business Club, and I did one in Bramall. And when I set them up, it was always with the objective to get money for a cause, shut a road for a Christmas event or whatever. So I'm very passionate about small businesses. And I think that they are the linchpin of everything that we can do for the country. And because I was born with hearing issues and a speech impediment and didn't have a great start, for me, having my own business and doing what I've done has kind of proved to me that it's there for everyone to take if they want to. So that's one policy. The other thing that I think that are areas that are interesting, early years is particular. I went to see a nursery recently, and we must, that's the start of everybody's existence is the early years. And obviously investing in that, I'm not sure that we've, done enough for that. And so that's another area. Town centres and redevelopment, massive area that we should be looking at. Empty shops. I mean, they were empty before. They were going to be empty. So that's a big area. Then we've got, all the peripheries that come off those things, people feeling safe in their streets, people feeling that they want to, as we know now with COVID, green spaces, parks. So all of those sort of remits are something, but a thriving economy and an economy that can deliver jobs. And that's in all of Greater Manchester. So that's, Lee and Wigan and, all that sort of stuff. And then moving on with our green agenda. How do we deliver that? How do we get those jobs? Where can we, we've got great workforce. We've got them all over, but we haven't necessarily got them connected. So all of those things roll into the sort of policy areas I'm very interested in. And I've instigated transformation in Trafford on a very small scale, and it's very possible to do it. But one of the things I've been doing now is going out to those areas, and instead of talking at them, I've been listening.
Mm. And you've mentioned the importance of business, Laura, and obviously being a business person yourself, you'll appreciate and understand challenges that small business in particular perhaps face. Where do you stand at the moment in terms of the recovery plan, where we are at this present time? There is still, I think it's fair to say, a difference of opinion at all levels of society, whether you talk to politicians, whether you talk to local authorities, whether you talk to businesses themselves, as to whether we're getting back into work quickly enough. What's your sort of instinct telling you at the moment?
So when lockdown happened, for a workaholic like myself, and I love work, so it wasn't, I don't have I believe a good work balance is the fact that I just like working. So when I'm very balanced when I work a lot, and I enjoy it, everything within my business. So I do fiber optic cabling and computer repairs, and I run fiber all over the country and in the northwest. We've got a long established name. We've been in business for 30 years, so for me it's quite difficult to say let's stop, but I was very happy to stop in all forms. And I think the government made it easier to stop with furlough schemes and stuff, less frightening, and obviously with grants. So that was very important. And then as we saw, we were on top of it, and we've got hospitals ready, people ready, because I think a lot of it was really about whether or not we could say to our doctors, look, you don't have to have them lying in the corridors. We are going to make sure you don't have to make these decisions that are so horrific and affect so many lives. And I don't say it's perfect, but so I think then when we got that ready, and then we started to see the numbers dwindling, by then I was ready. I was already very much working through it because we did a lot of schools. So we were dealing with schools all the time, but actually going much more hands-on and getting the people back into work and stuff, we were pretty much ready. And I had actually engineers, say, look, can I just go into the office on my own because I can get away from the family or whatever, because I think they needed that interaction, that change. And so no, I think it's probably been time, but I will understand completely that people are very worried. I don't blame them, I am too, but I think it's time. And the other side of that is, if you didn't go back, how was it going to affect people's life? Mental health, massive issue.
I think that's where I am at the moment now, Laura. I think initially I very much understood why the lockdown was needed, why it was necessary. The point you make about not overwhelming the NHS, crucial that was the case, that we protected that. But ultimately now I'm looking at the other implications of a further 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it might be, lockdown. And, the biggest killer, both nationally and globally for generations now, has been poverty. And if we don't get the economy back on track soon, then unfortunately, we're going to see many more businesses go bust. We're going to see many more people become unemployed. And so for me now, the longer term implications are actually more concerning than the short term tackling the virus situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that with everyone I've spoken to. So I've been in lots of fish and chip shops and spoken to lots of them. They've done well. They've moved on to new technology. I've been into market halls all over and seen how they've been operating. Bolton was a particularly outstanding market hall, I have to tell you. They very quickly got to the point where they had Facebook up and running, and all the fishmongers and stuff who were not very social media savvy, they went straight onto that. And actually had a complaint from one of them last Saturday before last, that they were overwhelmed. 40 orders I've got to get out. 40 orders. And I was like, well, someone must be grateful for 40 orders. So I think that they'd been innovative, but there was also their, the other shops there, they need to trade, and you can give them an amount of money and you can sort of get, but they're frightened about, and then you get the other side of that, will they ever trade again? So I went to see somebody who, tattoo artist, and of course she was very keen to get open, and found it very difficult, very stressful. Thank the government for what they'd done, but now could they let them get back to work? And you could see that. So yeah, that without a shadow of a doubt, that it is, I think, very important that we don't get people too used to being at home, and then get them too worried about going back. When I didn't work, this is honest to God's truth. So I had my first child, and I didn't work for a while, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, and I lost all confidence. And I ended up helping out at the local Oxfam on the till. I couldn't even work the till and mind anything. And I'm a very confident person. But I just got used to being at home with the baby, you see. I just lost that. And even though I had the business and everything, I'd stepped away from it so far, I was actually really finding it difficult to go back. And that is where we might be today. So we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think there is a mental blockage now among some people. Part of it driven by fear, I think. But part of it, I'm sure, as you say, Laura, a lack of confidence. You mentioned schools and the importance of education. And of course, that is a big part of the role that a mayor would be clearly interested in and looking at. One of the areas that I think we've been badly performing through this crisis is how we've handled the education situation. And even now, I'm getting letters from my girls' schools suggesting that we may be going back in September, but there's still that question mark. Again, I would suggest if we don't get kids back into schools, it's going to be very difficult getting our economy moving again. What's the situation in Greater Manchester across the piece? Are those conversations happening in terms of ensuring that we are ready to get back to some sort of normality, at least in our education system come September?
Yes, from what I know, and bearing in mind, I'm the candidate, not the,
Yeah.
So I have to fight tooth and nail to get as much information as I get, and I do a lot of reading, and that's why I speak to so many people, because I don't think you can actually draw any conclusions. Go to nurseries, I speak to schools. So the trouble with the schools thing was, obviously, we made it so that people could work better from home, kids could work better from home, laptops going home and stuff. And a lot of my schools that I dealt with were very up on giving out tuition online, and that worked really well. But then when it came to whether they should or shouldn't go back, they were seeking confirmation from the councils. So to the point that one of my nursery schools let me know that they were looking to have, for their insurance purposes, they needed to have a write-off from the council to say that they could go back to work, to operate. So that was very complex. And then, of course, I think, and sadly, with all things, it always goes a bit political. The unions were saying a different message. The government was saying there wasn't clear combined thinking. And so some of the schools were seeking guidance, I know, from certain parties to see whether or not they could go back to school. It was really kind of, if you feel comfortable, but they only felt comfortable when the council said it was good. It was a difficult one. But I believe, like you, I would get, subject to us not having a massive spike, subject to the fact that they don't suffer, the kids. This would be a whole different argument. If we had kids being affected, and it was much more harsh on the outcomes for the children, believe me, you and I would be thinking differently.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's not. So for them, they need to get back to school. And I've got loads and loads of young kids around me all the time who are very active, they're campaigners, and they've got friends, and they want to get back to school quick, and they want to go to universities, and they want to go to colleges, and they want to go to that start back. They're tired of it too. So I hope that we get a really clear message to go to school in September, and I know lots of us feel the same way about that.
Okay, and of course the other crucial area, and it's something that we always talk to elected mayors about, is transport, because that is an area that there's clear powers and responsibilities. There's resources available for them to tweak local plans, do things a little differently, and transport's a massive issue across Greater Manchester. It's particularly pertinent within city centres in terms of congestion and movement and networks. You've mentioned the fact that it's important that our towns are well connected to our cities. So in terms of that transport piece, Laura, what would your sort of vision moving forward be? Where do you think Greater Manchester is getting things right at the moment? Perhaps more importantly, where are we getting it wrong?
Well, for whatever reason, over the years, I don't think we've had enough investment in the outer towns. So, for example, we need that transport going to Lee. They're looking at having that's been put through by Grundy, James Grundy, to get the Goulburn and those lines sorted, because we should really have a ring around Greater Manchester. So that you can easily access Bolton and Bury and Wigan and all those different areas. So there's been a lot of talk about that getting on, and I know a lot of transport stuff is going in that. And I really think we should champion that. There is a bottleneck, of course, at Piccadilly, which causes a problem, and that's a line issue. So that's something that I would really, and I think anybody would want to get resolved and looked at. And I do think that because of I have quite a good working relationship with our MPs, well, very good, and with our councillors. They're all putting into this fund that you've got, the transport fund, to make sure that they are getting those outer loops opened up, and that will do so many things. One is it stops congestion. It gives you the opportunity to fight for local businesses, and make sure that we don't have to then go too far to get to work. Or if we do go to work, we can actually never go into the city centre, which we know carries the most pressures, because they're just going to go into Bury, or they're going to go into Bolton, or they're going to that. And then, of course, with that, you need to make sure you've got the jobs in those areas. So I think it's a whole real policy change about delivering some of the older lines that were, the Beecham lines is one of a better use of it, those coming back into play, and then making sure that we deliver that transport. And then within the city centre, there's an awful lot we can do with the buses. So I'm very pro looking for a partnership model on the buses. I've spoken to the buses. This is pre-COVID. Clearly, I haven't been able to have those meetings since. So I would look to get the relationship working with them. There's another element of not going where people, where there's maybe it's more awkward to get to. Well, they need to be put back into play. If you're running buses, you've got to run them everywhere. And I'd like to really dig deep into that so that we can really offer this service. And then, I don't know if you saw, there's a report out today about our aging population. We are aging. So, and we're going to have a lot more older people. And we need to get them used to transport. And and have a connected transport. There's a lot of work to do around that. But then there's the green side of things, where we have more cycling, realistic cycling. I mean, I cycle. If you look at the weather today, you're not really going to cycle very far today. It's a wonderful concept, and I'm absolutely behind it. But we need to have a real concept where it's not just a few cones running along the road. It's got to be a real option where that and that's going to take investment. And I know there is a narrative along that, but we need to get sharper with that. And I'm kind of joining up the dots there. And then I'm not averse to having faster routes for buses to go in and out. But if you're going into the town centres where we know congestion is hard, they're going to have to be electric buses, where they're not going to give out the levels of pollution.
And Laura, you mentioned town centres, and I think made a very valid point that, forget COVID, there was many of our high streets, many of our town centres struggling, facing huge challenges in terms of voids, empty properties right across many of our towns now, and Greater Manchester is no exception to that. Anything that you think that we ought to be doing to try and support those high streets and town centres, because it seems to me that certainly for the short term, it's not going to be a retail-led recovery for them, is it?
No, but if you have a look at the high street as it sits now, I have been bashing on about this for forever and a day. So it is all about change. But if we look at all the amount of high streets so I did a lot of work with Altrincham High Street, the regeneration of the town centre and the Great British High Street. That was very much on my portfolio, very much something I've driven. And libraries, when some, they're all dead and nobody uses them. Now we've got like massive increase in library uses. Certainly if they're in the right places and you combine them with something like a doctor's surgery. So let's take the high street where we know there's going to be, catastrophic, for want of, I hate that word, but it's a true word. There's going to be a lot of damage going on there, but it was already there. Then where do we use those spaces better? So I don't believe the answer to that is to say another community space, because I think you're actually going to run out. Oh, I'll have too many of them. But I do believe that we make them into homes. And I've got a whole concept about high street to homes policy. So why wouldn't we use those sites? Why wouldn't we make it? And I know that the government's making it easier to do this. So we make that high street where you live there, you shop there, and you can, and the infrastructure's there. You know, if you want to put more homes in, let's take, well, it doesn't really matter where you go because they've been all over. But if you go to Radcliffe as an example, there's plenty of options to put where the empty spaces are to make them into homes, and with great connections to transport. It's already there. And so I think that's where we should be focusing. And I think you can get thousands of homes on those sites. And then you regenerate the high street because people are living there. This is not an unusual concept. It was quite complex, I think, because the legislation wasn't as easy, but I think the government's paved the way to say that this is, the way that people want to live. I certainly would have no issue in living in a town centre, in an apartment, above a shop, whatever, and be able to go out and get my shopping and stuff like that. And I think that, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but that is a huge area that we have never really grabbed and seized.
And then, of course, the thing that is concentrating everybody's minds at the moment is our health and social care activity. And Greater Manchester has a unique devolution deal, which gives it some responsibility in terms of that. And I don't think, again, it's any coincidence that where we've seen potential for local delivery, we've probably seen improved results. So as the Greater Manchester Mayor, let's fast forward to June next year, and you're having your negotiations with Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson and whoever. What are the sort of powers that you'd like to see devolved to local regional governments? I'm being a bit facetious there in terms of saying you would be doing the negotiations, but are there things genuinely that you think, your experience as a local councillor, for example, actually if we had more power to deliver on these things, we could do it more effectively than those buggers in Whitehall?
Yes. So there is a two-way narrative on that. There's been a long time of a conversation that you've just said to me that has been running through this. So what is wrong when we have a commitment and so many MPs and a vast area? What is wrong with us being very firm about our conversations with the government and actually breaking down the barrier to work with them so directly? Because I intend to do that. I don't intend to have that because firstly, it's not north-south anymore, because as the speed gets faster and as we travel about and can talk like this, they're only next door. I intend to make it so that I'm literally going to be talking with, and they are going to listen to me because I'm listening to the residents, and we are just going to see a transformation of integration. And when I was at Trafford, we integrated. So there's a lot of integration that needs to think about, for example, on policing. If you get called out as to a job as a police officer, sometimes if it's domestic violence, which I know we've seen a huge rise in, and not, and I know we passed bills on that, but nonetheless, if you're going through domestic violence, I don't think that makes a blind bit of difference to you. You just want to get out of that situation. But that integration between their needs as social care needs and domestic violence needs is where they join up. So they should be able to immediately say, this is a domestic violence issue. I need you to come with me to this. This is an issue. So the police aren't just left with that. Now, we tried some joining up thinking about all of this integration. And a lot of it was led by the fact that you've got certain areas that you can't, confidential information, for example, which was stopping them necessarily, these agencies, talking to each other. And, you know, we need to have the mental health teams out with the police when it's needed and when we know that calls come in. And then the police will be free to go and get on with what they need to do, and that piece is picked up, that piece of work, by, you know, a relevant agency. So a lot more. That's just one example, but we saw it in children's care. We've seen it when we have if you have an elderly resident that goes into a hospital, the main carer may be the wife, but do we pick up on that wife and say, what do you need for us to keep you at home? And if we keep the wife well at home, when he comes out of hospital, then they're fit and well to carry on the care for that other person. But what we don't do is necessarily join that up. So I think a lot of joined up thinking is being missed there. And I'd like to really work at that and dig into it deeper. And the only way you're going to do that is have those conversations with those people, with the agencies, and say, can this work? Can we do this? A bit like apprenticeships. I'm very big on apprenticeships. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
No, that's fine. I think some very relevant and salient points. I think we all recognise that sometimes those barriers and people operating in silos don't necessarily achieve the right results. And obviously, I'm a great believer in devolution. I think the more power we have devolved, the easier it is to actually break those barriers down. And again, I would have to say that over the years, and I take the politics out of this, I think Greater Manchester has been an exemplar in many areas of that. But equally, like all big organisations, it can always do better. So I'm sure we can always look at focusing on areas where we think we could get better results. Final point I want to make to you, Laura, in terms of, you know, you were supposed to be fighting the election 2 months ago, yes. And the election's been moved now to 2021. Fingers crossed we will be back up and running by then. So there's a big budget. I know Rishi Sunak's done an awful lot of announcements in recent times, and I think, you know, I would say again, take the politics out of it, the Chancellor has done a good job in terms of protecting the economy thus far. His next task, of course, is going to be about growing the economy again. And it's a different skill set, isn't it? You can protect things, but then when you're actually trying to make them flourish and grow, you need a different set of tactics. What are the sort of things that you'd like to see Rishi Sunak deliver in his autumn statement? Are there any particular measures that you think will benefit businesses, of which, of course, as you've said, you've got a keen interest, not least because you run one, yeah. But also perhaps Greater Manchester itself? Anything that particularly you'd like to see him announce for the area that you think would be good for GM?
Well, I think that we need to be very innovative with our businesses. So we should be reaching out to businesses, and I know Tesla was an offer recently. I desperately wanted to rush out and offer Tesla a piece of Greater Manchester and say, where would you like to come round here? I want that joined up thinking where we have workforces. If you have a look around the areas that I've been around, all around, you've got very little manufacturing in some of those areas, but they used to be manufacturing, and you've got very little. I'm not sure anybody's really reaching out to businesses, bigger businesses, international businesses, and I'm sure there is work done, but perhaps not enough. And I think as a voice, I would like to be able to say, well, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to seize those businesses. I'm going to sell them how great it is because we've got great, we've got the workforce here. And then how can we integrate that better? Now, we have loads of universities. And then on top of that, we have loads and loads of kids who get to 16, 17, 18 are looking for jobs. We have a pool of people here that if we've got the right connectivity, if we've got the ability for them to get from A to B, we should be reaching out, getting them in, and then offering them jobs. So if you go to a university here, you actually have a guaranteed role at the end of it. And we need companies to be spoken to say, we'll direct. So let's look at, for example, there's a massive thing I've got about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is huge, and I'm not sure, and there's millions of jobs available in cybersecurity. It's a big way forward. We could be leading on that kind of apprenticeship role. We could be leading in that with our universities, and I'd like to really join them up. And I'd like to then say to kids, not only will you come here to study, but we'll get you work at the end of it. And the way the government does that is put its hand in its pocket to make sure that that is so. And you cannot offer what you can't, what you don't know. And I don't know all the ins and outs of that to be able. It would be lovely to say, you know what I'm going to do? When I get in there, I'm going to make sure. But you have to be realistic. But I'm going to make sure, because I'm, of the same colour, that I get an awful lot of speech with, my fellow blues in government and my MPs, and say to them, we've got a commitment to these people here, and I need you to put your money where your mouth is and open and work with me. So businesses should be encouraged here. We have so much to offer, and it's such a great area that we just need that bit more connectivity. We need to offer the jobs. I'm big on apprenticeships because I really struggled myself. So I think there's an issue with English apprentice. If you do an apprenticeship, I don't know if you know this, but if you have to get level 4, to get on an apprenticeship, well, that's English level 4. To some of us, and if you ever watch my Twitter or Facebook, you'll see it, who cannot spell because we didn't get the early years in, it is ridiculously difficult. And if you're asking them to go into stuff where they're doing things like cybersecurity, a massive growth area, if you're coding, all that sort of dynamic, high-moving, fast tech industry, they don't care if you can spell. It's irrelevant to the gamer. It's irrelevant to those people. So, I think I would like to also have a word with that about why we are so, insistent on getting that particular bar when I think there are other things that we could do. So there's quite a lot of work there.
There's always plenty of work to be done within the world of politics. I know that from my past experiences. Laura, the final point I'll make to you today, not a question as such, but I know that you've been, as you've stated in our conversation today, listening to what people out there have to say, and you've got a business survey running at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah.
We'll put a link on the end of this video when it's published, so that people can directly come to you and answer those questions. But again, were there any key findings that you were looking for out of that?
I was looking for people who needed help and guidance. So I spent a lot of time when the grants came out. I'm not going to pick on which councils didn't move quickly, but some of them were slow. Now, Frank, I don't know how many people or small businesses, I'm talking really small, the baby game here. And the big ones, but the ones that break my heart the most. They needed that money desperately. And I was ringing up the councils and screaming at them, literally, please, you've got the money in the bank. I know it. Now pay it out. Well, we're checking this and we're checking that and we're checking this. So the survey was very much about making sure. And what about if you speak a different language? Now, I came a lot of people who spoke different languages, and they didn't, trying to say that they need to go speak to their accountant and that they could get a grant for £10,000 or £25,000. I had to have those conversations. I was getting stuff translated, and I was really pushing that message. So that was really, and the survey is really about what could we do better? What do you need from me? And then I can join the dots up. It's an honest fact that I go on to Ian Lewis a lot. Money Supermarket. Is it? Yeah, it is. And I watch what he says, and he's so enthusiastic, and he gets you all hyped up. And Martin Lewis, that's it, Martin Lewis. Sorry, moneysupermarket.com. And I go on to him a lot, and I go, oh, he's got it right, and I try and make sure people. I wish they would. It's there for grabbing. There is lots of money available and lots more money coming. And there's apprenticeships money coming. What about this meal voucher, this £10 voucher? I want to get the nitty gritty so that they know that they can do that. And will it work? Won't it work? Well, lots of businesses I've spoken to, it will work, but it will only work if they can get hold of the information. So the survey is about the big stuff and the little stuff. Have you had enough information? Then I'll email them back. And I'll even go and see them when we can and chat to them about what we could do better, what could be more. And that's when you start having great conversations and they spread the word of what we can do. So yes, I would really appreciate that, Frank. That'd be absolutely marvellous.
Brilliant. We will have the link up to that survey, so please complete it, send it back to Laura, and hopefully in the not too distant future we can get you along to a live downtown event. That'd be great.
That'd be really great, and I really appreciate it. And I'll be honest with you, I watched all your previous ones, and they were very good. So the
Thank you.
yeah, I was really impressed. They were really good. So I thought, oh, I'll enjoy this because people telling you how they developed or made their businesses is fascinating. And if you're on the sidelines wondering why your business is doing so well, you can gain inspiration from conversations like that.
Well, I can tell you, Laura, you're number 101 video conversation that we've done through lockdown. So you're in good company. We've had some great people on, and I've really enjoyed the conversation today. So thank you for taking time out to join us in the Downtown Den.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
That was Laura Evans, the Conservative candidate for the Greater Manchester mayoral role. And as I say, hopefully we'll be getting her along to a live downtown event in the not too distant future. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and we'll see you all again in the not too distant future. Cheers.